Imagine a group of knights so powerful that kings feared them. A brotherhood that began with only a handful of warriors, and eventually became one of the wealthiest and most mysterious organizations of the medieval world. They were known as the Knights Templar. But how did these warriors rise from humble beginnings to become a legendary force? And why did their story eventually end in betrayal, imprisonment, and destruction? This is the story of the Knights Templar. Welcome to History Uncovered. The story begins in the aftermath of the First Crusade. In 1099, Christian armies captured Jerusalem after a brutal campaign in the Holy Land. Thousands of pilgrims began traveling to Jerusalem, believing they were fulfilling a sacred journey. But the roads were dangerous. Bandits and armed groups threatened travelers, and the journey from the coast to Jerusalem could be deadly. Around 1119, a small group of knights decided to protect these pilgrims. They were led by a French knight named Hugh de Payens. At first, they were only a small brotherhood. Their mission was simple: protect travelers, defend the Holy Land, and live according to religious vows. They eventually became known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The name would later become famous throughout Europe. The Knights Templar. Their headquarters was established near the site believed to be the ancient Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. This gave them the name Templar. But these knights were different from ordinary soldiers. They were warriors, yet they were also monks. They followed strict religious rules. They were expected to remain disciplined, obedient, and devoted to their mission. On the battlefield, however, they were trained to be fearless. Templar knights rode into combat wearing heavy armor, carrying shields, swords, and lances. Their white mantles, marked with the distinctive red cross, became one of the most recognizable symbols of the Crusades. Their reputation grew quickly. As more pilgrims traveled to the Holy Land, the Templars became increasingly important. European nobles began donating land, castles, money, horses, and other resources to the order. Soon, the small brotherhood was no longer small. The Templars established bases throughout Europe and the Middle East. They built castles. They controlled estates. They collected income from farms and properties. And they developed a network that connected distant parts of medieval Europe. But their greatest strength wasn't simply their wealth. It was organization. The Templars developed a system that allowed money and resources to move across long distances. A traveler could deposit valuables in one location and receive documentation that allowed him to access those funds elsewhere. For medieval Europe, this was remarkably sophisticated. The Templars were becoming more than warriors. They were becoming a powerful international institution. Their castles protected important territories. Their knights fought in major battles. And their financial network gave them influence far beyond the battlefield. But the Crusades were not peaceful. Muslim rulers fought fiercely to regain territories lost during the First Crusade. One of the most important figures to emerge was Saladin, the powerful Muslim ruler who united large parts of the region. In 1187, Saladin defeated the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin. The defeat was catastrophic. Jerusalem itself soon returned to Muslim control. The Templars continued fighting. They participated in campaigns across the Holy Land, defending Crusader territories and supporting armies. Their reputation as elite warriors only grew stronger. But every victory came with a price. The Crusader states were becoming increasingly difficult to defend. By the end of the 13th century, the situation had changed dramatically. One by one, Crusader strongholds fell. In 1291, the city of Acre, one of the last major Crusader strongholds, was captured. The Templars lost their base in the Holy Land. For an order created to protect the Crusader states, this was a devastating blow. The Knights returned to Europe. And there, they possessed enormous wealth, powerful connections, and an organization that stretched across countries. But their greatest enemy would not come from a battlefield. It would come from a king who desperately needed money, and who was about to make one of the most controversial decisions in medieval history. His name was Philip IV of France. And soon, the Knights Templar would discover that armor could not protect them from political power. By the beginning of the 14th century, the Knights Templar had lost the land they were originally created to defend. Jerusalem was gone. Acre had fallen. And the Crusader states in the Holy Land were disappearing. But the Templars themselves remained powerful. Across Europe, they owned castles, farms, churches, and large estates. They had money. They had influence. And they had connections with some of the most powerful people in medieval Europe. But one king was watching them closely. Philip IV of France was deeply in debt. He needed money. And the Knights Templar possessed plenty of it. At first, Philip tried to gain greater control over the order. But the Templars were not willing to simply surrender their independence. Then, in 1307, something extraordinary happened. On the morning of Friday, October 13, orders were carried across France. Templars were to be arrested.
You are under arrest.
Hundreds of knights were captured at the same time. The accusations against them were shocking. They were accused of heresy, corruption, and other religious crimes. Some prisoners were tortured. Under brutal interrogation, some confessed to accusations that historians continue to debate. But were the Templars actually guilty? Or had the accusations been created to destroy them? The answer is complicated. There is no simple evidence proving that the entire order was guilty of the crimes they were accused of. Many modern historians believe political pressure played a major role in their downfall. Philip wanted control. He also wanted the Templars' wealth. And the French king had powerful influence over Pope Clement V. Eventually, pressure against the order became impossible to ignore. Templar trials spread across Europe. Some knights were imprisoned for years. Others were executed. In France, several senior Templars were burned at the stake. Among them was Jacques de Molay, the final Grand Master of the Knights Templar. According to historical accounts, de Molay maintained that the order had been falsely accused. Then came the final blow. In 1312, Pope Clement V officially dissolved the Knights Templar. The organization that had survived wars, sieges, and decades of conflict was officially finished. But that wasn't the end of the mystery. Because one question has fascinated historians and treasure hunters for centuries. What happened to the Templars' wealth? Stories began to spread that the knights had hidden enormous treasures before their arrests. Some legends claim that treasure was secretly transported out of France. Others connect the Templars to mysterious artifacts, lost documents, and secret knowledge. There are even legends claiming that the Templars discovered something beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But much of this belongs to legend rather than proven history. What we do know is that the Templar network was dismantled, their properties were transferred or seized, and many surviving members disappeared into other religious or military organizations. The order was gone, but its reputation survived. Centuries later, the Red Cross of the Templars still appears in books, films, video games, documentaries, and conspiracy theories. They became symbols of mystery, symbols of hidden treasure, symbols of secret knowledge. But the real story may be even more fascinating than the legends. The Knights Templar were not immortal warriors hiding an endless secret. They were medieval men who lived in an age of religious conflict, political ambition, and constant warfare. They began with a small mission: protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. Over time, they became wealthy and powerful. Then the same power that had made them famous helped make them a target. Their story reminds us of something history has shown again and again. Power can protect you, but it can also make you dangerous to those who want what you possess. On October 13, 1307, the Templars discovered that even the most powerful organizations can be brought to their knees. And centuries later, their final fate remains surrounded by unanswered questions. Were they simply victims of a king's ambition? Did some of their treasures truly disappear? And how much of the legends surrounding the Knights Templar is actually true? Perhaps you will never know. But that uncertainty is exactly what keeps their story alive. The Knights Templar may have disappeared from the medieval world, but they never disappeared from history. Thank you for watching History Uncovered. If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's most mysterious orders, subscribe for more stories hidden beneath the surface of the past. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep uncovering history.